cold weather is it that Prabhupada says in Krishna book that heat can always be tolerated, but cold is devastating. And Prabhupada was in being interviewed by a news reporter, and Prabhupada was in Chicago and it was getting cold. And the reporter said, "Do you believe in a heaven and a hell?" And Prabhupada said, "Yes, but not exactly like yours." Prabhupada said, "For us, hell is cold."
There's also hot hell, right?
Say that again?
There must also be hot hell. There must be probably both.
Well, there's that copper planet. I mean, there's...
That's pretty hot.
But that was Prabhupada's analysis. That hell is cold. And there's that, when Giriraj Maharaj's father was meeting Prabhupada in Bombay for the, I don't know, first or second time, and he was inquiring about Prabhupada's program, his travel. And he was so impressed that Prabhupada at an elderly age was traveling so much because it's not easy, Well, was it clothes hung in the sun, a woman separated from her husband, a horse tied up, and a man forced to travel? All these things become aged. Chanakya Pandit. So Prabhupada was telling him how Prabhupada travels. He's in the December, January. He's in India, and then when he's in and Giriraj Maharaj's father said, "Oh, so you're always in warm weather." And Prabhupada said, "You've understood my strategy." On one hand, but it's like a racehorse. If a racehorse doesn't run, it becomes, I mean, sannyasis, we like to travel. We like austerity. We like to preach. You like a little to be out there and a little difficulty and challenge. Otherwise, you get lazy and fat. Start fighting with each other. Sweet, yeah. Because there was a competition. They wanted him to come to Hawaii, and Govinda Das, he wrote and said, "Prabhupada, it's mango season has started." Prabhupada, and that's when Prabhupada said, "Better that," because he had that choice of going to see Professor Kotovsky. Okay, Ram. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijanna Balaba Girivanadari Gopijanna Balaba Girivanadari Jasoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanatari Jamuna Tira Vanatari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Balaba Girivanadari
Yasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Bunatari Hare Krishna. Can we go lower? Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bo Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Jayaro Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayaro Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayaro Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariva Jakacharya Siddha Shish Madhusavangiri Sabhajadan Bhakti Vedanta Sai Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Jakaguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Guru Vaishnavrinda Ki Nam Chai Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Shri Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mathura Dham Ki Dwarka Dham Ki Navadip Dham Ki Jagannath Dham Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Ganga Maya Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Sambhira Bhakta Vinda Ki Srila Prabhupada Ki Sri Radha Giridhari Ki Shri Krishna Sankirtana Jika Ki Gopremanande. All glories to the Samuel devotees. All glories to the Samuel devotees. All glories to the Samuel devotees. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna Sudamo Bhagate Damaganadibhi Saha Kalandasadasham Mesha Parano Konurodata Narayana Namaskricha Naram Chaivam Narotama Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat. Bhagavatam is written as the sun. It is written just after the departure of Lord Krishna towards an abode accompanied with knowledge, religion, etc. Persons who have lost their vision to the dense darkness of the age of Kali shall get light out of this Purana. Before beginning our study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, we should first offer our respects to the personality of God in Narayan, to the Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, the goddess of living Mother Saraswati, the author Srila Vyasadeva, and my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. I wanted to say something about the chanting. Prabhupada gave us a way of chanting the verses. He would say each word, then we would all chant 3 times, and then we would chant together. And that's the formula Prabhupada gave us. It's the formula we followed for decades. And now I'm finding people skip the word for word, or they just immediately go right into the whole Sanskrit line. And it's not the way we're supposed to do it. And if somehow or other there's a new memo that has a better idea than the way Prabhupada taught us how to do it, that send it to me, because I haven't gotten it yet. Yeah, so it's okay, fine. I'm not just... And that way the devotees chant the Sanskrit better. Not that that's the essence of the thing, but and then when you read the word for word, it just brings the verse, it creates an auspicious atmosphere, it improves the devotee's ability to chant, and it brings the verse to life. So just remind each other if you know, yeah, we have a formula, and it's like so many things, Prabhupada gave us a certain way to do things. And he didn't do anything casually. Satsrupa Swami told me, we're off the track and I want to get to something else, but Satsrupa Swami said that he gave Prabhupada a pen, a nice Parker pen or whatever it was. It was a good pen in those days. And he said 3 years later, he was Prabhupada's secretary. And Prabhupada had the same box. He had the same pen. You know, I lose a pen in 15 minutes. Prabhupada had the same pen. He had the same box. And he had the same rubber band. Prabhupada finished using the pen, he put it in the box, and so Prabhupada he wasn't obsessive compulsive, but he was very thoughtful about everything he did. Just as establishing the GBC and you know the how to phase into the next wave of gurus after he left. I mean, everything Prabhupada did, the BBT, the way he set it up, everything Prabhupada thought about. So the way he gave us the way to chant the verses is the way he gave us to chant the verses. And once you give up a little on this and you give up a little on that, and when we change a little, well, that doesn't, you know, and the whole thing begins to kind of erode. So I don't think I'm being a fanatic or lost in history. Okay. So there we go.
Still, that's the way everybody does it.
No, it's not. People do all kinds of stuff.
No, but I'm just saying, as I visit around, still, they say,
Yeah. But some places they don't. And I always find it strange. And anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. Let's stick to the positive. Na sheke so vitum tatra puru krechro. Krechro. We need Dravida. Krechro vepatu gantam aichat tato briksha kotarad iva sananalat nisheke sovitum tatra purukrichtro ruve putau gantum aichat tato briksha kotaradi vasanalat nisheke sovitum tatra purukrichtro ruve patu gantum aichat tato vriksha kotaradi vasanalat nisheke sovitum tatra purukrichtro ruve patu gantum aichat tato vriksha kotaradi vasanalat nisheke sovitum tatra purukrichtro Na, not. Sheke, was able. Sa, he. Avitum, to protect. Tatra, there. Puru, very much. Kritra, difficulty. Uru, great. Vepatu, suffering. Gantum, to go out. Aichat, desired. Tata, from there. Briksha, of a tree. Kotarat, from the hollow. Iva, like. Sa'analat, on fire. Translation. As a serpent living within the cavity of a tree wishes to leave when there's a forest fire, so the city's police superintendent, the snake, meaning the life heirs, wished to leave the city due to the fire's severe heat. Also, you say, as a serpent living within the cavity of a tree wishes to leave when there's a forest fire, so the city's police superintendent, the snake, wished to leave the city due to the fire's severe heat. Purport. It becomes very difficult for a snake to leave a forest when there's a fire. Other animals may flee due to their long legs, but serpents, only being able to crawl, are generally burnt in the fire. At the last stage, the limbs of the body are not as much affected as the life heirs. And we're going to do the next verse as well, and the translation for verse 15. The limbs of the serpent's body were slackened by the Gandharvas and the Yavana soldiers, who had thoroughly defeated his bodily strength. When he attempted to leave the body, he was checked by his enemies. Being thus baffled in his attempt, he began to cry loudly. And the purport. At the last stage of life, the different gates of the body are choked by the effects of disease, which are caused by an imbalance of bile, mucus, and air. Thus, the living entity cannot clearly express his difficulties, and surrounding relatives hear the sound guru, gura, from a dying man. In his Mukundamala Stotra, King Kulishekar states, and I'm going to jump ahead because we don't have to read it in English. My dear Krishna, please help me die immediately so that the swan of my mind may be encircled by the stems of your lotus feet. Stem of your lotus feet. Otherwise, at the time of my final breath, when my throat is choked up, how will it be able for me to think of you? The swan, end quote. The swan takes great pleasure in diving within the water and being encircled by the stem of the lotus flower. This entanglement is a sporting joy. If, in our healthy condition, we think of the lotus feet of the Lord and die, it is most fortunate. In old age, at the time of death, the throat sometimes becomes choked with mucus or blocked by air. At such a time, the sound vibration of Hare Krishna, the Maha Mantra, may not come out. Thus, one may forget Krishna. Of course, those who are strong in Krishna consciousness cannot possibly forget Krishna at any stage, because they're accustomed to chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, especially when there's a signal from death. Om Gena Tamarantasya Gyana Gena Salakaya Jakshushan Militan Gena Tazare Shri Gurave Namaha. I wanted to, and I'm thinking of the time factor, because the principle here is that the life air and the living entity, when the body is dying, have become afraid. And this principle of fear, as we were saying the other day, is woven in, it's baked in, as they say, to the material nature. The fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of mental distress, fear of uncertainty, fear that our life has no meaning, has no, ultimately it's all whimsical, capricious. So there's all kinds of fears. Now we're going to go into those in just a minute. And what is the answer to those fears? And we have our answer. And why do we believe our answer? How is it not just wishful thinking? So, riffing off that principle of fear, let's just take one of those aspects. Of course, it's almost, we're swimming against the stream. Swimming against the current. Everything in this world ends. Everything, it has a beginning. What is it? Growth, birth, growth, maturation, decline. Oh, byproducts. That's it. Byproducts, then decline, and death or dissolution. Everything's going through that. So if we, and by nature, we want unlimited happiness. They make all kinds of mental adjustments. Like one man said to Prabhupada, well, I'm not afraid of death. And Prabhupada said, so I'll come at you with a knife and slit your throat, you won't protest? I mean, just bogus. Oh, I'm not afraid of death, or, I just accept it. Nobody wants to be unhappy. I mean, you've got a few masochists who, slam their head in the door to see how it feels, but generally, the majority of people do not want their happiness to end. And yet here we are, where everything comes to an end. Like, what's wrong with this picture? So how will there not be angst? How will there not be? And yet we find that the devotees are fearless. Is that a fool's fear? So, and even everyone wants, when they hire people, I was talking with Gopal Bhatta Prabhu, who is a business, got 2,000 employees, and he's a businessman. He's also a nice devotee, but he's also a businessman. And he was saying, how do you motivate employees? Now, people are motivated in the beginning. There's all kinds of different motivations. First you just want to have enough shelter. Then you want to have enough food. Then you want to have a little luxury. But after, then you want the key to the executive bathroom, or, you know, whatever it is. You want to be able to take the executive elevator. You want some, so there's different levels, and as you get the basic levels, and a little more, and a little more, a little more. But there comes a point when more money or more perks don't really motivate people. There's a saturation point. There's a point of diminishing returns, that you get more, but it has, like, you know, when you only have $100, if you get $50, well, that means, you know, well, you've doubled whatever you had. But when you've got $10,000, under the $50 is a drop in the bucket. So what motivates people after they get the basics down is that their life means something. Like our own Kulin, you know, our Kulin Tantod, he was working at Google. He was making $150,000 a year or something at Google. And he thought, well, what am I doing? You know, so he quit and actually went back to school and became a doctor, because he wanted to do something that his life had some meaning. So, I mean, it's a material example, but my son, it's a long story, but if you take the Earth, and if you compare it to Jupiter, Jupiter's the largest planet in our solar system. It's like a speck. It's like Earth is like a tiny, here's Jupiter, and it's a little tiny, like the end of my finger. It's a little tiny speck. Well, that puts things in perspective a bit. And then if you take Jupiter, and the biggest planet, which compared to, we're just like a tiny dot, and if you take Jupiter and you put it next to the sun, it's even smaller. It's like a tiny speck next to the sun. Then if you zoom out a little bit more, I mean, our solar system is like nothing. And when you go, he sent me a link, and it was saying, it was one of the top astrophysicists, and he was saying, what we know, they took that Hubble telescope that, you know, looked into deep space. I mean, who knows what they're seeing? Nardi Mooney goes by with his Vina, you know, and whoof, you know, we found a dark hole. Who knows what's going on out there? But what they say, this top, he's at MIT, a top astrophysicist, and he said what we can see, even looking into deep space with our, you know, as far as we can see with our best technology, 10,000 light years. I mean, who knows? But they said it's if you go down to the ocean and you see how much the water, you know, when the ocean at high tide, the waves at high tide. So picture the United States, and picture how much that tide comes up, and the whole rest of the United States. What we know about, what we can see, even with our most advanced, it's just like that the washing of the waves compared to the entire United States. So now, on one hand, that can be kind of depressing, that we don't matter. What I do, when you actually think about it, all the things that did I get a parking place, or I had a fight with my wife, or all the stuff that people, I didn't get a good night's rest, or, I'm not, whatever we're ticked off about, we all got our set of. One of the best ways to get to know people, and just let them talk. Ask them about themselves. People it's their favorite subject matter, and it's natural, and they'll talk forever. Yeah, I mean, I've, some. It's part of my service, and people are really uptight about or they're mad about this or mad about that. You just let them talk. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything, and afterwards they'll say, "Great talk. I feel so much better. Thanks for the good advice." Actually, you didn't say anything. They just got it all out. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that when we look, the fact that we want to feel like we mean something, that our life has meaning, and if we're in a meaningless universe, why does our message matter? We're coming up to the Christmas marathon, and we're going to read some verses about the Christmas marathon. And why does it matter? I guess I'll jump ahead. First off, there is an inherent fear. I guess I'll just tell this story right off the bat. And some of you have heard it before. Radhanath Maharaj told me. There was, I don't know how many years ago, but there were terrorists who went into the Taj
that Oberoi Hotel in, how long ago was that? 2011, so 9 years ago. And there were terrorists. And they shot the whole place up. And the thing is that they actually had the blueprints. For what it's worth, they were quite, like Duskritina, misdirected intelligence. They were quite clever. And they were actually, it later came out, they were trying to say, we got the whole thing under control. They were in there for three or 4 days, at least 3 days they were in there. And whenever the police would there's a reason I'm telling this, don't worry. When the police would get in there, they'd corner them, and then they'd just throw smoke bombs. And the police couldn't see where they were, and then they were escaping, and they were, Now, the head of the SWAT team, the top SWAT team in Mumbai, his sister, Radhanath Maharaj told me this, his sister is a devotee. And his sister, loving sisters always trying to get, devotees always trying to get their family on board and help them out. So the sister told her brother, the head of the top SWAT team in Mumbai, military actually, not the police, but it was actually the military. She put the Nishringa ringtone on his phone as a Nishringa mantra, the devotees chanting Tabakata Kamala, as the ringtone on his phone. She just happened to do that. So he was, being a genuine Kshatriya, he led his team in there, and they were going to get these guys. And at one point, according to, as Radhanath Maharaj narrates, they got him trapped in the ballroom. It's a big room and with pillars, columns. And they had him trapped. And they thought they had him boxed in. And then they threw these smoke bombs. And the hole where you couldn't see literally your hand in front of their face. And the terrorists were up on a mezzanine, like on a balcony, and they were just machine gunning. They were just mowing down, And he told Radhanath Maharaj, he said, what does it sound like? I think Radhanath Maharaj, when you hear people getting shot by, it's like if you were to shoot a bullet into a watermelon. That's what it sounds like. Pretty graphic. And he could hear his fellow soldiers, his troops, or whatever you call them, his men, crying out in pain and he could hear him getting hit with the bullets, and he ran this way and he ran that way, and people, they didn't know where the door was. People died. Finally, he said, I don't know my way out of here. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know anything. He said, and he just stopped, and he remembered Krishna within the heart. Wait a minute, I've got this Nishringa ringtone. And he just turned on the Nishringa ringtone and said, if I'm going to go, let me just remember Krishna as I'm going. And he just stopped, put on the ringtone, shooting, people calling all around him, dying. After some time, the terrorists retreated, the smoke cleared, and all around him, people were shot. You know where he stopped? Behind a pillar. And when he went around, you heard it too, see, and when he went around it, he saw the bullet holes. I mean, he could have stopped anywhere. So Radhanath Maharaj told him, just like the Lord came out of a pillar to save Prahlad, he put a pillar in front of you to save you. So for the theist, we know that, all right, just like who was saying the other day about Ganesh, they were saying that Ganesh has two things. Sometimes he clears the path for us, and sometimes he puts a block in front of us. If it's good for us, for devotees, how does Ganesh serve devotees? For the materialists, that's a whole other thing. But how does Ganesh serve the devotees? Because he's a devotee, just like a devotee. We like to serve devotees. That's what makes us happy. So Ganesh is a devotee. He likes to serve the devotees. All these materialist people are always asking him for this and that, and it's a drag. People are, But a devotee, that's fun. He likes it. So what does he do? He'll clear the path for a devotee so he can advance. If that path is good for their spiritual advancement, he'll clear the obstacles. But there's another side of it. If the path you're on is not good for you, he'll put so many obstacles to help restrain you from doing what's going to get you into trouble. So he does two things. He clears the path, but he also for the devotee, he also puts obstacles. So for the devotee, we have that either Krishna saves us, or if we're getting difficulty, and why doesn't Krishna relieve, why doesn't he solve this problem? Well, maybe that problem is good for you. Just like Trinadapi Sunechena. It is the key. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said all devotees should wear this as a garland around their neck, this verse. And Krishna says in knowledge, the first step of knowledge, wisdom, is humility. So here we're reading about Paranjana and the snake, and it's humbling. You're forced to bow down. You're forced to just give it up. Like it's an interesting parallel as you read this, how old age is just like a baby. A little baby can't communicate. Little baby, can't control its own bodily functions. Same thing when you're old. You can't speak, you can't communicate, completely dependent on others, fear at every minute. It's a rough spot. But it's humbling. And one comes, just like I've mentioned, I'm going to mention it again. It's a phenomena that rarely happens, but does happen. There used to be a guy who used to come to the temple, and he was a horse trainer. He worked up here at this, where the turf meets the surf, up by Delmark. And it doesn't happen very often, maybe 1 in 1,000 times. But every now and then, you get a horse. You know how they're all jacked up, the horses, and they ding, and zoom, off they go. Every now and then you get a horse. May have been a great racer. May have been, a thoroughbred. Ching, they pull it, they open the gate, and the horse doesn't run. And what's happened? And the guy told me, once the horse comes to that conclusion, you never get him to run again. And they think, wait a minute, I'm knocking myself out. I'm racing, and I come right back to the same place. And what do I get for it? They give me a carrot or an apple or something, Forget it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not knocking myself out for nothing. So, in a similar fashion, and once they come to that realization, he says you can use them for studying. They'll fathering other racehorses, but you never get them to run again. They just think, forget it. I'm no dummy. I'm no jackass. Been there, done that. It's the original been there, done that. So similarly, when everything we had, everything we accomplished, everything we were, what is it? We're right back where we started from, as a baby. And an intelligent person thinks, let me just surrender to Krishna. Let me just surrender to God. Now, so it's old age. Does not that thing therapeutically treated become the cure of the self-same disease? Narada Muni says. It's a great statement. Does not that thing, therapeutically treated, become the cure of the self-same disease? What does that mean? What does that mean, Alex? Huh? I thought you were. That's why I asked you. Your eyebrows were going up and down. I thought you were thinking about it. All right. Well, anyone know the classic example? What happens, too much milk products causes disturbance in the bowels. What's the cure? What? But I got sick from a dairy product. Does not that thing therapeutically treated? It's milk, but it's transferred into yogurt. It's therapeutically treated. Becomes the cure of the self-same disease. So what to do about desire? Desire got me into trouble. But to desire for Krishna, that's a whole other thing. Action in inaction, and inaction in action. Even you're standing still, meditating. You're generating karma because your mind's all over the place. But a devotee is very active, but it's inaction. There's no karma because the devotee's acting for Krishna. So that things which get me into trouble, therapeutically treated, which means in devotional service, becomes the cause of deliverance. So the point I'm trying to make is, in a roundabout way, is we have the message to counteract this angst, this fear, which is in every category. There's fear of being defeated, fear of loss, fear that my life has no meaning, what was it all about, fear of pain. So, it is the bigger than Prabhupada said than birth, death, disease, and old age.
No, what is it? Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's what I'm saying. The propensities, the driving forces. Of all of those, the most difficult, the one that causes the most trouble is defending, which Prabhupada often calls fearing. So that factor of fear, and it becomes, anyone know another example of something therapeutically treated? Here's an example of the addition of knowledge. What did you say? Thorn. You can use a thorn to pick out another thorn. But here's the example I was thinking. If you see it's a snake. But what happens when you click on the light and you realize it was what, Ram? It was a rope. You think, what was this? What was I afraid of? I was afraid I don't want to take time on that. Or what's another example? A snake is very dangerous. But how do you know if a snake is no problem? Poisonous snake, what do? Yeah, you break the teeth. And then it's going to gum you to death? I mean, I don't know what the snake's going to do. So that thing therapeutically treated. So that fear is treated by Vedic knowledge. Just like it says here, I was thinking about that even we may forget Krishna. There's that last line in the Ishopanishad. It's verse 17 in the Ishopanishad, that even if I forget you, please don't forget me, knowing all that I've done for you. And the fact of the matter is, Krishna is not an ingrate. Even the slightest pin, what to speak of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what to speak of Lord Nityananda, this simple service, little humble service, and Krishna will deliver us. So Krishna doesn't forget. So, and why do we believe all this stuff? Well, I'll just say this quickly. Because Prabhupada taught, the Vedic literature is a great science. What's happened in the world of thought is that spiritual things are nebulous. It's a matter of faith. It's a matter of emotion. Now here's hard science. We know this. And there's the physical and there's the metaphysical. They made a divide. That, okay, physical, I can cut, I can saw, I can measure, I can replicate. It's tangible. It's real. I realize it. And, this metaphysical soul, God, it's all intangible. It's all theory. It's all, well, when you die, maybe you'll find out. Maybe not. Maybe you blew it. So, and one of the reasons it's happened is because they base things on the Bible. And frankly, you go to Genesis and the creation, and there's so many things that are just wrong. And the way they step around it, they say, well, it's an allegory. It's okay, there was the word, and that's whatever. They sort it out. But 6,000 years ago, the earth was. But what made me think about was in this purport, it talks about bile and mucus and what chokes up the whole Vedic understanding in every field that we can measure. There's different pramanas. There's physical evidence, there's logic, ultimately there's Shastra. And I was listening to a tape, and Prabhupada was saying belief in Shastra, there's Shraddha, faith. Ultimately it depends on faith, but there's enough that is as far as we know, Vedic literature can be measured. It can be confirmed. It is the most reliable source. You look at the sun. How big is the sun? It's the size of a dime. But we know that how big it actually is. As I was describing, the Vedic literatures describe the sun. They describe the solar system. The whole thing is there. When they thought the world was flat, everywhere I walk it is. The Vedic Prabhupada says loka. They're called lokadvipa. Loka means round, like a ball. It also means place, but it means round like a ball, Prabhupada was saying, and dvipa means island. So the planets are described as round islands. The whole solar system, everything's explained. There's time calculation from the atom.
It's a hexatom or whatever, I forget what the Sanskrit word is. But when you're lying, suppose you're lying, the sun's coming through the window, and those little particles you see floating up. So Vedic literature takes those and divides it into 1,000 pieces. There's your subatomic particles and how it's all working. So from the macro to the micro, it's there in the Vedic literature. How the child develops in the womb from the time of conception. From when the mother's, when the seed and the sperm meet, the whole thing's described. That's before they had ultrasound, before they, how did they know all of that? So my point is that the Vedic, whereas you have other literature, I don't mean to pick on anybody, there's many good things in the Bible, don't get me wrong, but it's very limited, and frankly, a lot of questions and mistakes in it. And people think, you want me to believe this? And put my I can't do that. But when you take the Vedic literature, if you actually analyze social system, Marx, classless society, Vedas say you're never going to have a classless society. There's 4 classes, and they're always there. They're always there. And you look at, who are those guys that they really went extreme? The Khmer Rouge in Cambodia? You would know better. But they actually they did everything. They poured everybody out of the cities, tried to make everybody into a farmer, live off the land, no elites. But the guys on top, Pol Pot, they were living quite comfortably. Everyone's equal. We're all equal, but I'm the number one equal. And you look at the communism. It was a complete farce. Never worked. Never does work. First thing the communists do, Mao and his company, they moved into the imperial palace, the Forbidden City. So the point is, from the sociological, from the scientific, from diet, from the cosmology, wherever you want to go, the Vedic literatures are confirmed, if you actually get into it. Therefore, if I have, as far as I can measure they're accurate, then isn't it logical that what I can't measure, what I can't perceive, I've got to believe something. Why not believe that source that as every step that I could confirm has proven true? Therefore, it's illogical to believe what I can't experience. When they describes Vaikuntha and the heavenly Goloka Vrindavan and the spiritual world, well, it was accurate up to the edge of creation. What about that which is transcendental? That's the most logical conclusion. So my simple point is, this is a lot. I'm just kind of giving you a short version. But the simple point is, if you start from the point of what is that bumper sticker? If you're not paranoid, you haven't been paying attention. If one's not fearful in this world, then you're just asleep at the wheel. What is that famous month? It's a great line by Devamrita Maharaj, the American dream. You know why they call it the American dream? Because you have to be asleep to believe it. So if one opens his eyes and thinks about it, this world is a futile, bitter, brutish, brief, and beastly. I forget Hobbes, I forget who said that. But anyway, the point is that that's an honest analysis of this world. And I struggle, and what is the use if I consider the cosmos? Just like, does anyone here, is Mother Teresa taking care of ants? Oh, they must be feeling a lot of anxiety being an ant. Better what to do. Let's get down there and try to get an ant costume and try to relate to them. It's insignificant. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't accept that there's an eternal soul and there's Christian, the spiritual world, we're insignificant. And all of our petty issues, and the ants have wars. Was that in your history book? The ants have huge wars. You know that, don't you? Oh, they have huge, vicious wars. What is it, the 100 Years' War in Europe? Even there's a 100 Years' War in the ant time. Anybody ever read about that? So the fact of the matter is, we have the message. Logical, reasonable, confirmable. actually, if you practice the science, people say, well, I chant Hare Krishna, nothing happened to me. Well, that's actually, they don't know that nothing. It's not that nothing happened to them, because when the Yamadutas come to get them and the Vishnudutas swoop in, they'll think, whew, thank God I said Hare Krishna. Literally. But the fact of the matter is, if I want to become a scientist, not even a top, an active in the scientific field, what do I have to do? To even get to play on the field, what do I have to have? Oh, we're way over time. What do I have to have?
Degree.
Have to have, what kind of degree? You got to have a PhD, piled higher and deeper. Permanent humility disorder. Or as they say in Australia, permanent head damage. Got to have it. Now, to get that PhD, what did I have to do? 4 years of college, at least 2 years as a master, sometimes 3. So 4, what does we could get out of high school? Well, let's just assume that. So 4 years of college, 2 years as a master is 6, and then to get a PhD, 2 years? Yeah, more like 4. So let's say 4 and 4, so it's 10 years, right? Just so you can play on the field. Now, if you spend 10 years, and to get your a PhD, you have to work under a professor and be his clerk and slave, and you really have to surrender, isn't it? Yeah, man, you have to surrender to get a thesis, and to get it's a whole thing, So, if you, as rigorously to get your PhD, I chant Hare Krishna, nothing happened to me. Well, and to get your PhD, spend 10 years in an ashram, living as a devotee. A couple years as an ashram, maybe you get married as a household or whatever. But chant 16 rounds a day, follow the 4 regular principles for 10 years. Will you realize the self? You're darn right you will. You'll be convinced Krishna's God, I'm not this body. You'll have that deep sense. So there it is. My simple point is that we have the message that delivers the conditioned souls, that relieves that fear, and it's reasonable and it's truthful, and people are crying for it. We'll end here. But Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that even though they're living in their, now I'm paraphrasing, but they're living in their hovel, in their go over here to diamond in the rough apartments. I mean, they're living like Cro-Magnon men. They're standing there while their dog and scooping it up, and don't even who's saying they don't want bathing is a problem? Why, the other day in the Krishna lounge, when the last time we had that Vijay, you were saying how bad it smelled. Why bathe? Garlic, so many different. They're living like Cro-Magnon men, and their happiness is so paltry, petty. So even though they're in this miserable condition, still in the core of their heart, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, they're looking out the door, they're looking out the window, they're looking down the street, and they're wondering, when will the Vaishnavas come and save me? So we have the deepest obligation. They're in fear, they're in anxiety, they're feeling their life is meaningless, they're waiting for the next wrecking ball to come through the window and knock them over. Because it will, it is coming from both sides. And they meet the Vaishnava who gives them the message of Krishna. And that fear is relieved, that anxiety is relieved. Not only that, but they find the best friend. So, at least for the Christmas marathon, we should be really thinking about how many hours can we go out, how many hours a day. That's hours in the field. Well, I went out and sang. Everything's great. Vaishya says if you just put your feet on the ground, fantastic. The fact that you walked out the door and said Hare Krishna to somebody, you're successful. Yes. But during the Christmas marathon, we should think, did I put in a full day? Karmis work 8 hours a day. Have I been in the field, not thinking about going out, not going out at 11 o'clock and taking an hour break to read and coming back at 4, and that's a day of Sankirtan. That's for my grandmother. But for young men, if the karmis can put in 8 hours, what am I doing? So we should feel that intensity. At least during the Christmas marathon, we should feel intense because they're crying and nobody else is going to save them. They're going off a cliff and we're going, well, I'll try, maybe tomorrow. Okay, so we'll end there. It's important. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna, because I'm way over time. Thank you, Prabhu.